All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Necessary Censorship. I am Jason. With me is Rob and Jeremy. We have an exciting topic.
Exciting.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best Jim Ross impersonation. We're going to talk about some wrestling. Some wrestling today. We're going to talk about wrestling. It pretty much kind of goes, we have different spectrums of wrestling knowledge. We have almost nothing over here. I'm more of the 80s, early, with the Hulk Hogan era and Attitude era. And then we have Rob, who's kind of the full spectrum here, who's
You're pretty much been,
current as well.
Yeah, pretty much been watching wrestling, following wrestling, professional wrestling since the late 80s.
My wife almost wanted to come for this because she could probably put all of us to shame on her knowledge of the like 80s and 90s. When we bought our first house together, there was a box of all the old WWF magazines.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah, and I think hers? I still have a few. Yeah, they were hers.
Oh wow.
And we still have a box. I still think I know where they are in the basement of ours. But yeah, like disclaimer, we know it's fake, so don't comment about, hey, wrestling's fake. Yeah. What? Sorry, Rob. That's why they changed it to World Wrestling Entertainment, because they knew, they're not fooling anybody.
Next thing you're going to tell me Santa's fake.
I thought we discussed that in the Christmas special, but anyway.
Nope, I saw Violent Night. That's a true story.
It is true.
He was a Viking.
We talk about that in the Christmas special, so you can go back and watch that in episode whatever number that was. But yeah, like, I know, like, we grew up in the 80s. Mm-hmm. My first, thing, I grew up loving Hulk Hogan. And I think a lot of kids my age did, our age did.
He was the face of it at that time.
It
Especially
was
with the cartoon and all that crap.
Take your vitamins, say your prayers, all you little Hulkamaniacs with his, 24-inch pythons.
All the little Hulksters running around.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the characters they had back then. And I think maybe, I know Rob is up to date. I haven't watched anything probably since last year's WrestleMania or maybe SummerSlam, but I watched the Royal Rumble that just took place a couple weeks ago, and I sat there and I had no idea who half the people were. The biggest pop, I think, was when Booker T came out, and I was like, hell yes, Booker T's out here.
The biggest pop, dude, lasts like 40 seconds in the ring.
You know what? Because I knew who he was.
Yep.
I think that's the one thing, maybe I'm wrong. If Rob, you might be able to, if agree or not, but I think that's maybe what's the current WWE struggles with, and it could be a multitude of things. Maybe it's just not as popular as it used to be, but that the characters aren't as like. I just remember them being larger than life growing up. You had Ultimate Warrior, Randy Savage, you had Andre the Giant.
Andre the Giant, talk about larger than life.
And you had Hulk Hogan, and then you eventually had like Sergeant Slaughter, and you had Earthquake and Typhoon and
Is this because
Yokozuna.
They have too many now?
I don't know, and it makes you wonder, because I just remember it being just incredible back then.
Well, wrestling has evolved so much. It's to a point where these storylines are getting so much deeper. It is a soap opera. So much longer.
It is a soap opera.
Yeah. Where it's again, it's a form of entertainment. But the
storylines, and we'll get to this as we kind of maybe go chronologically here, got pretty huge in the Attitude Era.
Oh yeah.
That's where I think it really kicked in. But like, I mean, if the one storyline that I remember, well, actually two of them that I remember pretty vividly was, during the early 90s when the first Gulf War was going on, you had like Sergeant Slaughter suddenly was Iraqi or something.
Yeah, he was the Iraqi sympathizer.
Yeah, and he had Iron Sheik and everything like that. And then you had Hulk Hogan with the American flag and I'm a Real American coming out and beating their ass every week. And So that was the big storyline. And then I remember the other storyline which was really big, was the marriage of Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth.
Miss Elizabeth, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember that. The one things I do miss, and I don't know if you'll probably, are like the little they were kind of like almost like talk shows. You had Piper's Pit, and then like where like all of a sudden out of nowhere they had a little side stage in the arena set up with like a little set.
Yeah.
Piper's Pit is the one that always comes to mind because it was hilarious. But then you had that one jackass that had his face that was bright red.
Brother Love.
Brother Love. There we
Love.
go. He had like a white suit, didn't he? And like a red tie or something or whatever.
Bruce Pritchard.
Is that his name?
Yeah,
Bruce Pritchard? See, my wife would be like, yeah, you moron. It's Bruce Pritchard. Yeah, like I just remember a lot of those, like you Mean Gene, Jimmy Hart, Bobby the Brain was always hilarious. I thought Bobby the Brain was great.
But Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon were probably the two best commentators to ever play the game.
And it's funny when you go back and you watch some of those, especially if you have the ability, if you have Peacock Network and go back and watch some of those. It really is amazing. Those two are.
Yes.
Bobby the Brain was just because his comments were hilarious. And I almost wish
Bobby Heenan was so great.
And he got away with a lot back then. But I almost wish he would have been around in the Attitude Era because Lawler kind of took his spot. Lawler was kind of like the stuff they got away with is almost not safe for work.
Oh God, no.
The stuff that they would say, they would be canceled if they tried doing it again. With some of the stuff they did. And once again, we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, Gorilla Monsoon. And even when Vince McMahon did some of it, it wasn't that bad. I didn't mind him as an announcer.
Back then you had Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain, or Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura.
Oh, the body was on there.
Jesse Ventura
right.
was calling the big events like WrestleMania, Survivor Series, and then Tony Schiavone a little bit back then too.
Sure. And then you had, and even the refs back then were characters. You had like the Hebner twins.
Yep.
And I don't, and that's the thing. You look back at it. The athletes now are much more athletic. They're
yes.
I mean, what were finishing moves back then? A leg drop, a DDT. A sleeper hold,
a splash off the top rope,
a body slam, a simple body slam. Where now you got guys like Brock Lesnar who do like 30 German suplexes in a row on a guy. It's so. I mean, it is kind of things have evolved a lot, and it you see those guys now. You can definitely see the toll it took on them because they were a product of the generation. They definitely weren't getting the therapy they probably could have used. They were probably, they were self-medicating with whatever, narcotics, whatever. And now you look at these guys that can barely walk.
Yep. On the road doing house shows.
Yeah.
300 some days a year, which some of the guys wrestling now still do.
Some do.
Yeah.
Some do. But then you got like the big names that literally come back a couple times a year so that they hit the big pay-per-views. Lesnar's guilty of it. He's
for the paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, he's the one that strikes me the most. You might know other names, but like I don't know, like how Seth Rollins or like
Seth Rollins is still full time.
Is he full time? And who's the other dude, the other Samoan that's running around?
What, Roman Reigns?
Thank you. Yes, him. Is he full time or is he still taking breaks?
Well, he's full time undisputed WWE Universal Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah, he's had it for like 3 years now, I think.
Just about.
But
he kind of plays on a part-time schedule.
And that's the thing, and I get that because they've a part of me says they earned it because I mean even Cena kind of started doing that towards the end. When they get older, I'm fine with that. Like the Undertaker did that a ton. He'd only show up for WrestleMania to keep his streak going, and I will
show
firmly
up around Survivor Series. And
I will firmly admit you know what? We'll talk about that in a minute. About how disappointed I was with certain things with that. But and one thing I mentioned to you guys off the air was I remember my parents not liking me watching wrestling growing up because I think they, I was the only boy in the house. I had two twin sisters, so they I don't know if they were worried about like me jumping off the top rope or something. I don't know, but
jumping off the garage and giving them an elbow while they're laying in the grass.
Yeah, and eventually though, I do remember like my dad would VHS. He would tape Saturday Night Main Event, and I just remember waking up first thing Sunday morning. Everyone is asleep still, and I would run down, put the tape in, rewind it. I'd watch the Bushwhackers, lick each other, and you'd watch, and I just, and Hulk was always the main event, or you'd have the Ultimate Warrior run down and shake the hell out of the ropes. I mean,
Saturday Night's main event back then, that was a big deal. That was a very big deal.
And that's kind of what evolved, and I would assume evolved into Raw. Because they eventually got out of the Saturday night time slot, but that was prime time. I think that was 8 or 9 at night, wasn't it? Or was it 7?
If not later than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did it go even later than that?
Yeah, I remember.
Like after the nightly news type thing?
I remember it being later in the, like 10 o'clock.
And I guess I could see later because that's why I never watched it until the next day.
Yeah.
Was that on regular TV?
It was like on Channel 4 or Channel 12 or
NBC,
something like that. Yeah.
It was on regular network TV.
I was in Florida at that time. I remember I thought it was on ours. It was almost kind of like it would say up here, it would be like My Television, whatever. It was like not UHF. It was UHF, not VHF or whatever.
Yeah,
it wasn't like the 4, 6. It was one of the ones on the like the higher end stations.
Yeah, the set. I could still remember the logo, the red, white, and blue.
Yep.
And I know you had mentioned the cartoon. I mean, that was a Saturday morning cartoon. I think it was Hulk Hogan Wrestling Superstars or Wrestling All Stars or what was it? It was. But it was a Hulk Hogan was the lead.
Junkyard Dog was in it.
The Junkyard Dog and
I just remember the bad Ultimate Warrior. If I'm not mistaken, was in there as the bad.
Oh
guy,
yeah. He was. I think he might have been one of the bad guys. I mean,
the bad guy team at the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, they had. I mean, the WWE or WWF at the time was everywhere. I mean, do you remember those stupid ice cream bars that had the crappy picture printed on them?
Yep. I remember. Yeah, I remember
the wrestling, the figures that I mean, I still have
the pillows,
the wrestling buddy,
the wrestling buddy pillows.
That was I remember.
I still have. I should have brought it. God damn it! Today he could have stood right on the table. He's like 100% rubber Hulk Hogan, and he's flexing.
And
it comes with the title belt. As an action figure, it's kind of pointless because he's not in any pics other than just flexing. Like, I don't know really what you can do other than that, but I remember my friend I think he had the Randy Savage one.
Yep.
And because we played with them so often, the paint got worn off on the elbows and the knees and on like the top of the head, like or whatever. But yeah,
I had so many of those. Yeah, those
really.
Those probably 8
to 10 inches,
tall,
give or take. Yeah, solid rubber.
Solid rubber.
You could beat the hell out of somebody if you threw it at them or hit them with
There's
it.
A good documentary, I think, on Netflix. The toys
that made us. Yeah, and they talk about those.
That one.
Exactly. No,
it was amazing.
I had friends that had the wrestling ring.
Which
I
had.
Did you? I mean,
forgot about that. Yeah.
That shit was everywhere. And so I remember watching a lot of that probably up until the late 80s, early 90s. Because like I said, I do remember the Gulf War crap with like when they would come out with the Iraqi flag and everyone would get pissed off. And then here comes Hulk Hogan and, whatever. And then, then by the time, you get a little bit older, you start getting, 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade in high school, I kind of drifted. But I remember, and you had mentioned earlier, just off the air, was that WCW picked up around this time. Kind of like WWF kind of flatlined. You had guys like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. I'm trying to think who else would have been run around. Yeah, I mean, you had Triple H. Right? He was Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the time, and you had these.
I mean, Razor Ramon. You had Scott Hall.
And then Kevin Nash and stuff. They were
in the early 90s,
and things just kind of got stale. You had Yokozuna, and just things just kind of went. And I think WCW looked at that and they capitalized early on what eventually WWE then did better at and overtook them was kind of that. Better storylines, maybe more risque or more like the characters a little bit better. I told you off the air is that I was not a WCW fan because I felt I was so loyal to WWF. There was no way I could do this.
like early, mid, even late 90s, like WCW was superstar laden. I mean,
And that's the thing that did they have Ric Flair at the time and everything? I mean, when you're talking about like Sting and
yeah, you can use Sting, Ric Flair, Hogan.
eventually he went there, right?
He went there. Randy Savage went there.
'Cause that was-
Goldberg came around in what,
But he went
98
bad
or
when
so.
he went there, right?
I mean,
Well, because I think Ted Turner looked at it as going, you know what, I think it was a beef with him and McMahon. Turner knew that if he could throw enough money at these guys, he could get them away from WWE, and so then that's kind of what sparked, and then, once again, I'm gonna push it again. There's a series on Peacock on the WWE network it's called the Monday Night Wars. It's fantastic, and it really shows how they battled and how the WWE was getting their ass kicked until what kind of was started by Degeneration X. DX started because it was in response to what in WCW? Do you remember? The NWO.
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, so NWO started. They were kind of thinking like the NWO was the anti-establishment. They're going to be the troublemakers. They're going to kick everybody's ass. They're going to rule the world. I mean, who is the turd? I always call him a turd. Bischoff.
Eric Bischoff.
Eric Bischoff was kind of the brains behind it. And that's, and I think in the Monday Night Wars, and it's kind of fresh in my mind, is because my wife was watching it recently, is, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Triple H, and Brett or Shawn Michaels were like, we got to do something, and Vince reluctantly let him go, and it kind of turned out to be the good, because they turned into the Degeneration X, and they ran with it. I mean, they were vulgar and they were vile and they were sexist, and they who was the Val Venus, then all these all these really TVMA, this is when the Attitude Era started kicking in, and that's when I picked up again, because it was like, okay, now we're like, who's this DX? What is going on? And they're fighting everybody, and then they brought in China, who looked like a man in the beginning, and before she had way too much plastic surgery to unfortunately she felt she had to do it to kind of soften her image,
to feminize her a little.
But that's when I kicked in it, and obviously my guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin, which for today's podcast I dug this out of the closet, vintage 1999 hat that still says World Wrestling Federation on the inside of it.
Wow.
I bought this when I dressed up as Stone Cold for Halloween one year. I shaved my head and wore this. I wore 2 knee braces, tight jean shorts, and a Stone Cold t-shirt. That's
knocking beers together.
Well, yeah, probably. And that's when I kicked in. It's because all of a sudden you had these characters that were, the storylines that I loved the most was really the Austin versus McMahon storyline.
Oh, because that went on for how long?
It went on forever. And actually, the best part was when, out of nowhere, McMahon fires Austin. And it was in Milwaukee at the old Bradley Center, where Stone Cold snuck in or broke in, and he was wearing full hunting gear. When McMahon was in the ring, I believe, he ends up going out there, and this is how crazy the WWE was at the time. He pulled a gun out and held it to McMahon's head.
Correct.
And I don't remember if he told McMahon to do it or it was like out of fear, but McMahon like pissed his pants, or it looked like he pissed his pants in the ring. And then when Stone Cold pulled the trigger, the little bang flag came out.
No way.
But they had him pull a gun.
Couldn't do that today.
No. I mean, and then the funniest part was like, I think Austin beat the hell out of McMahon, and he was in the hospital. And then McMahon is like sitting in the hospital bed, and and he goes, nurse, and he turned, and it's Stone Cold wearing like scrubs, and he turns around and he pulls his mask down, and then the funniest part is he hits McMahon over the head with a bedpan, and it hits it hard. It's like pong, just hits him right over the head, and then beats. And I think that was when that might have been around the time that Mick Foley as Mankind came out and was trying to make friends with McMahon and everything. I mean, the characters they had there, and then The Rock, who started out as Rocky Maivia, following in his dad's footsteps.
And don't forget, the Undertaker was there through this.
Undertaker too, which
this
yeah,
whole
and
thing,
that's another one too that eventually I was going to get to is
for me the single greatest character in the history
he was
of
so
professional
freaky
wrestling.
because he was hilarious because Paul Bearer was such a character, Paul Bearer. He was such a character with the urn and all this, and you look how the Undertaker evolved from a dude with a really amazing mullet and flowing hair
red hair
and just kind of a crappy uniform but I mean he had the trench coat and the hat, which I and it evolved.
Yeah.
He ran with it. He ended up getting all tatted up, and he really pushed the dead man. That was the thing too. He was the one character I can remember never changed. Like Stone Cold changed. Stone Cold was like he was partnered with Ted DiBiase initially. He had the $1 million belt. I think he was called Stunning Steve Austin.
Yep.
Hunter Hearst Helmsley was Triple H, and he was like this Hunter, this real prompt and
hoity-toity kind of almost English.
But the Undertaker stayed the same from Death Valley. He never changed.
He went through his American Badass.
No, but he
phase.
never changed though. Like he was always the Undertaker.
Yeah.
The American Badass when he came out the Limp Bizkit and rode his Harley around the fucking ring, which I remember seeing him live, and when he would do it, he'd rev the hell out of it, and all you smelled was exhaust for like 10 minutes. And so the Undertaker, The Rock, Mankind,
probably during that era, probably one of the most iconic matches ever in WWE history was the Hell in the Cell between Undertaker and Mankind.
Which, and it was part of the King of the Ring pay-per-view in 90. Was it 96 or 98? It was one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really amazing about it is if you ever, so the match is insane to begin with.
Yeah.
But if you really want to watch it, you got to watch the documentaries and the conversations about it because, it started with Mankind going out first. And I think Mick Foley said in the whole thing was like, he was walking up and he decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to the top. This wasn't really planned. They didn't really talk about it in advance. And Undertaker came out and saw him on the top and was like, well, I guess I'm going up. And so when you watch this, you're watching this guy who's almost 7 feet tall trying to climb this thing. And I give him credit because, I mean, their boots were huge. I can't believe they were able to climb up. But what they'll tell you is that it obviously wasn't meant to have two guys that are probably close to 300 pounds on top. They could
600 pounds worth of
that they were walking, and they said they could hear the metal ties snapping that were holding. And as you watch them, you can see the fence sagging. And it wasn't they do, and you can see they're kind of taking their time and they're kind of punching and blah, blah, blah. And I think he even knocks Mick Foley down once onto the chain link and it's fine. But then he gets up and Mick Foley said to Undertaker, toss me, let's go. And Undertaker throws him off the top of this thing, which I think is about 20 feet off the ground, into the Spanish announce table.
Of course.
Because that damn table got destroyed every single pay-per-view. When you saw that Spanish announce table, you knew that thing was going away. But you knew, and can you remember what Jim Ross said?
Guys, broken in half.
Broken in half. Oh, my God, they killed him. He's broken in half. I mean, Terry Funk comes running out.
Yep.
I mean, everyone thought Mick was seriously injured or dead. I mean, it was to the point where everything stopped. They raised, I think... The Undertaker at this point is still in the top.
He's still on the top of the
and
cage.
They need to get a stretcher to the back. So they start raising it with Undertaker still on the top.
Oh, wow.
They get Mick Foley onto a stretcher. They get him kind of into the runway, getting him out of that. And he says, you know what? I'm done. I'm not done yet. But what no one knows yet, and if you watch it, he gets up. He has dislocated his shoulder. He has a dislocated shoulder at this point. He goes back. They lower the cage. Because now they're thinking we got to get the Undertaker down. Mm-hmm. Mick Foley with the separated shoulders starts climbing back up the cage. And Undertaker's going, what the hell? As soon as he gets to the top, he's going to choke slam him. He choke slam him. It breaks through and he ends up falling straight down onto the mat below.
Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that was a planned spot.
That was not a plan.
That was not supposed
because
to happen.
Mick Foley again says, I think I might be wrong, I might be embellishing, but that he probably sustained a pretty horrible concussion because his
Yeah.
head slammed onto the ring.
And didn't he lose
Well,
some teeth?
eventually, yeah. And so he says he doesn't remember a lot of this stuff. So he ends up slamming down, and then the Undertaker, so everyone's freaking out. And I think Terry Funk even comes running back in again. And I think the Undertaker choke slams him so hard he kicks his shoes off. Terry Funk's shoes go flying off. But then, you know, like, yeah, I mean, the scene is, there's a scene that was on Mankind's walk-in screen, that was always a him looking out smiling. His tooth is sticking in his nose because his tooth got knocked out, went up his nasal cavity, and was coming out of his nose. So there's a tooth sticking out of his nose.
Holy crap.
He ended up dumping, you know, thumbtacks in the ring. He gets thrown on thumbtacks. Did a barbed wire thing come out at one point? Maybe. I don't remember. I mean, they beat the hell out of each other. The Undertaker eventually wins. They finally, and Mankind walks out. He would not go on a stretcher. He walks out.
One of the toughest son of a bitches to ever.
And
to ever do
McMahon,
it.
the best line from Vince is, he went up to both of them and thanked them for what they did for the company, but don't you ever do that again. Because he knew, and that catapulted. I never bought any of the pay-per-views on tape or anything. I bought that one because it was so iconic and so ridiculous. And years later, I met Mick Foley at a Comic-Con a couple years ago.
Oh shit.
And I walked up, and he's wearing sweatpants, and he's a big guy. I mean, I didn't realize, you don't realize how tall he was. A little bit taller than me, but I said, you know, Mick, and I said, I know you've probably heard us 1,000 times, but I'm like, you were one of the toughest guys I've ever seen. You're Hell in a Cell. I said, I would love to get a photo. And it's a picture of him and the Undertaker fighting on the Hell in a Cell. He signs it. And he goes, so I paid for a photo, and he goes, do you want a photo with the championship belt? And I said, hell yes. Those things weigh a goddamn ton.
Really?
He put it on my shoulder, and it was like holding a sack of concrete up there. It's awesome. Yeah. And so, I mean, you had these larger than life characters in that Attitude Era that then eventually overtook WCW, because it had led to WWF buying out WCW and pulling talent in. I just don't think for me, it does not get any better though than that Attitude Era. I mean, you know, you had violence. There's always a blood match. There was the bra and panties matches. There was
pretty much gratuitous nudity.
Yeah, and do you remember the strap matches?
Oh yeah.
There was a strap match. I hate that, we were talking about Mankind. There was a strap match him and The Rock did, where they kept showing Mick Foley's kids ringside and his wife, and they were bawling their eyes out because if I remember correctly, and I don't know if I remember if it was a strap match or it was something else, but there was a match that Mick Foley got handcuffed behind his back, and The Rock beat the living hell out of him.
He was blasting him with a steel
chair over
right in
and
the
over
face, in the
and
head.
over and over again.
Yep.
And that was when his kids are just bawling in the ringside because he's in handcuffs. And the crap he did. If anyone wants a good read, you read his book, Have a Nice Day, that he wrote. His first book, he talks about his wrestling in China or Japan, which is insane. And then how he brought that here as Cactus Jack. And then they kind of toned it down. He went to Mankind and everything. And but like his battles with the Rock and Sock connection when they eventually joined.
Yep.
And then Stone Cold with, just his battles with McMahon. And if you remember, then The Undertaker got involved with, he had a thing called the Ministry. And then it was the corporate ministry when he partnered up with McMahon.
Oh man. And
then they kidnapped Stephanie McMahon was a storyline. So when you're talking about storylines and stuff like this, they did get really goofy. They got away from those, like I talked with the brother love and the Piper's Pit things. They got away from that. They did more segments.
Yeah.
They always had kind of time segments. You had the opening segment, you had ones kind of in the middle, and then you had, they had them kind of spaced apart. I just think that, and that's why I think the current WWE suffers from is, why do you think always gets the biggest pops though, is when they have to bring back those guys. So right now WrestleMania is coming up in the early August or excuse me, April. And the one article I read is that they wanted Stone Cold to come back and wrestle.
But
And
apparently
he said
he's
no.
not.
He said no. And honestly, good for you, because I think his last match he had against Kevin Owens was perfect. Because, I mean, how many wrestlers can actually debut in their hometown and then have their last match in their hometown?
Exactly.
That's not,
You know, and so why risk it? I mean, especially him. He had broken neck. He has fused vertebrae, and you see all these guys now, and they're just limping. I mean, Mick Foley,
They're
when
destroyed.
he walked around the table to come just take his picture with us, you can just tell. He's not sitting on a comfy chair. He's sitting on this crappy stool with this little. I mean, it can't be comfortable.
He's probably sitting on a chair that he got hit with back in his wrestling days.
It's very possible. Yeah, I loved the Attitude Era so much. I mean, I was getting every pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And I was a Stone Cold guy. My wife loves The Rock. I admit I love his movies now. He's great.
And I think one of the forgotten things about the Attitude Era was the tag team wrestling during the Attitude Era. Too.
Those were, I think the best tag teams at that. Well, actually, there's three that come to mind. You have the Hardy Boys, which
Hardys, yep.
I think were fantastic. Jeff Hardy took things to a level of jumping off 20-foot ladders and doing these swan dives. I think were incredible. The Dudley Boys,
Dudleys.
which I think were awesome, and then the third that I loved were Edge and Christian.
Yep.
Those three, I
Those were
think,
the three.
really were like they catapulted the tag teams, because the Hardy Boys and the Dudleys. I mean, the Dudleys. What was it? It was Devon,
Get
got the
table.
tables, and sure shit. There's all of a sudden, for some reason, this ring's always had 30 tables underneath that were just ready to get broken.
I mean,
And kendo sticks, and God knows what
again,
else.
there's so many iconic things that came from that too. Like the ladder matches came from that.
And the
tables-
ladder matches with those guys got nuts, because
Yes.
when have you ever seen step ladders that are like 20 feet tall?
A step ladder.
A step ladder. When have you ever seen step ladders?
those were all wooden ones, right?
No, they were aluminum, but they were. You had to be able to climb up both sides, because you had to be able to fight when you got to the top. And there was one that I remember I just saw it, and when I remember because it was in a thing that my wife was watching. It was the Dudleys. It was all the the tag teams that I just mentioned. Matt Hardy took out Bubba Ray, jumping off a crazy ladder through a table. And then you had Edge and Christian in the ring, who were knocked out, eventually started climbing the ladders. I don't know what happened to Devon Dudley. I don't know where he is at this. But at one point, there's two giant step ladders with a table balanced on the top of them. Matt Hardy gets up there. Edge punches Matt Hardy off the top, who then flies off and through another table in the bottom. I don't know how we didn't have more deaths in the ring. Why, doing crap like that, it had to be Owen Hart, who had a horrific malfunction.
Yeah.
Because of his harness coming in as the blue blazer. If anyone remembers that one too, that was a really weird pay-per-view, because you're watching it went to black and it came back, and JR was trying to explain what had happened, and the show went on, which was a little odd.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of bad decisions, that one being one. The tribute to Chris Benoit might be another one. After, everyone came out and praised him when they found out that him and his family were dead, and then it came out shortly after that he killed everybody and then himself. Yeah, so the WWE is no stranger to making bad decisions, but I don't think it gets any better to me than that Attitude Era. And I'm trying to remember what kind of ended it. I mean, I don't remember. I know eventually, they brought SmackDown in, and I did like SmackDown Wars and everything, but I don't know what eventually led to the downfall of it.
It was a new crop of superstars that were coming in, which turned into the Ruthless Aggression Era. You had John Cena coming up. You had you had Kurt Angle in there. Brock Lesnar was coming up too.
Ruthless Aggression. I do remember that line.
Ruthless Aggression Era.
And then did that eventually lead to just, now we're not doing blood matches anymore. Now we're not gonna.
It's kind of the PG era.
And I'm all fine too with, because at the in the Attitude Era, the Divas were just strictly eye candy. Yeah, they
Oh, yeah.
wrestled. There was only a handful of them that
wasn't
were
very
decent.
good.
The women that wrestle now are very talented. They're
God.
you know,
So right now, sometimes the women put on better matches. I mean,
yeah.
like women like Asuka.
I do know who that is actually.
Almost always a good match.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of good professional female wrestlers. Asuka, Becky Lynch, Bayley, even some of the newer, younger ones that are coming up, like Io Sky, Io Shirai. You know, where Tucci was.
See, and that's another thing I think that the WWE did right is that they created their own developmental league with the NXT.
Yeah.
By giving them the opportunity to train like in the G League.
Yeah.
You know, but give them the experience of going out there and doing the stuff, but at a lower scale, not as big grand, but still be able to learn. And then still get those pops like at the Royal Rumble. They'll throw one or two NXT guys that are maybe trying to come up and, you know, they'll make an appearance at a show here and there. Yeah, I remember going, you know, because for a while, Milwaukee never got Raw or SmackDowns.
No.
They only did house shows. And those are hilarious because shit'll happen at house shows that will never happen. I mean, I saw a title exchange change hands.
Wow.
And then what happened like 2 minutes later, then they like change the rules and then the guy gets his belt back again somehow anyway. But they would do crazy shit, you know, at house shows because it's not being taped. That's not really part of the storyline.
Oh, I've gone to house shows that were put on in the UW Oshkosh, some gymnasium up there.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, you know, and for as much as I don't really know, like, I mean, it just seems the last couple years though it's been Lesnar, Rollins, Roman Reigns are the three that just hold the belts because I don't know if they don't have any talent to try pushing it. They don't like the talent. I don't know. I just wish there was a little bit different. But then again, I'm biased because I wish everybody was like Stone Cold and The Rock and The Undertaker. And I don't think you're ever going to get something like that again.
There are some very excellent storylines going on right
yeah.
now.
And so maybe that's, I mean,
WWE.
this is the time of year that I always kind of get pulled back in. It always kicks off with the Rumble because I love the Rumble. There's just something about it. There's something about, I really wish though they'd go back to when you'd get about every fifth guy was some jobber or like you know like the chicken the big chicken
the gobbledygooker.
Yeah, you know, somebody, you know, like Doink the Clown come running in and you know I wish they would go back to the days where like, you know, like the Brooklyn Brawler. I mean, he was the guy that was always like the guy like the guy that looks like he beat his wife, just drank the 40 of Mickey's and now he's gonna come in and wrestle.
Total jobber.
Yeah, you know, I kind of wish they went back to that, but this is when I get pulled in because you got the Rumble, which then leads to there's another
Elimination Chamber is coming up.
But is the Rumble and WrestleMania, are those there isn't like another major one in between it though, right?
Well, it's the Elimination Chamber.
But I'm just trying to think back like
traditionally.
No,
back in like the 80s and 90s, you had Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series.
That's the other one. And then where did King of the Ring was more of a winter thing, wasn't it? Or no?
I think so.
Because I used to like the King of the Ring tournament too. That was awesome.
I know. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, but anyway, wow, we might have to do this again.
Yeah.
We have to do this again. I mean, you know,
because we really haven't even gotten into modern.
Yeah, and I will probably defer to you on that. But then again, you know what?
To catch up.
Yeah, and you know, and here's the thing: WrestleMania is coming up in a couple months. Maybe we'll reapproach it again. Like I said, now I get drawn in. I get pulled in around this time of year, and then after SummerSlam, I kind of go, all right, I'm done for a while.
Yeah.
You know, but hopefully, you know, if you guys liked it, hey, drop us a comment. Let us know what you liked. I mean, hey, I'm a real American. You know, Austin 316 says I just kicked your ass because Stone Cold said so, and if you can smell what The Rock is cooking or whatever the hell else, and rest in peace and whatever. So, well, thank you guys, Jeremy, Rob. I'm Jason from everybody here at Necessary Censorship. Thanks for watching, and remember, we got WrestleMania early August, or why do I keep saying August? April.
April.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Cheers.
Goodbye.